let's talk about the upcoming changes that we got previewed yesterday. And I will talk about each class and give you my feedback. And please let me know your feedback as well, of course, what you think about it, what you like, what you don't like. And this is just a preview, so there might be some changes coming after that. So they might adjust it, maybe completely revert it like they did last time. But it's not very likely for most of the stuff. And this one is a big one. So I can already say you this is one of the best or the biggest changes we got, and a lot of reworks. It might not be the best ones, but at least we get a lot of experimental stuff that change the game. I think this is a balance patch that changes the game in all game modes for the most part. And this is a good thing, in my opinion. Even though a lot of the changes or some of the changes might be arguable if that's a good thing, but at least it changes stuff and are not just some number changes. As always, thanks to my dear supporters on YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. Okay, let's jump right in. First general change, they now give you Dark Aura when you blast a dark field instead of area blindness, which was obviously a very bad thing. Area blindness is not very crazy good if you compare to stealth or healing or even might. Now you get Dark Aura. Dark Aura is like, okay, it reduces incoming condition damage and causes torment on enemies that strike you for 1 second. So it's not insane, but at least it's something better than area blindness. And they really rework a lot of stuff to work with Dark Aura, like on Thief and Revenant in particular, which is apparently what they want to do. I feel like it's not the most crazy thing, but it's better than, I guess, area blindness. So we will get to that when we get to the classes that I talked about. But let's start with Elementalist. Elementalist, you see a lot of changes here for Hammer, but you can summarize it with the Flame Wheel thing. So in PvE, the Flame Wheel here gives you now 15% and will go on to 5% damage buff. This is important because this is a big nerf to Tempest that used Hammer. Because Tempest, DPS Tempest with Hammer, got a 15% damage buff, and this damage buff was not used on the Hammer itself for the most part. It was, but not most importantly. Most importantly on Overload Air. And now it does not affect it anymore that much because it's only 5%. And the damage buff that you got from this 15%, they applied it to almost every Hammer skill. So Hammer itself gets a buff by, let's say, 15% for all the skills, the damaging skills. But the Flame Wheel, the damage buff is reduced so that the Air Overload does only get a 5% buff. This is a nerf to DPS Tempest, but a buff to every other spec on Elementalist that uses Hammer. So for the people out there that use my Celestial Catalyst, this is a big buff. This is a really big buff, actually. A lot of damage. But other than that, not too much. We get some healing improvement on Ether Renewal. We get Signet of Water gets even more buffed. It's insane. The skill is already quite crazy what it does, all of this stuff together. And then the biggest thing here for competitive modes is Cleansing Fire is now a stun break. So it was a stun break at the beginning of the game. Now it's a stun break again. This is really good. I think that makes some kind of Elementalist builds really happy in competitive modes. It doesn't give you stability, so you still lack the stability uptime, but you actually get Condi Cleanse and stun break, which is a good thing. Even in PvE, that can be really helpful. I see that maybe on a Fire Weaver or something like that, it could be run. And then you have Arcane Power. This is again completely reworked. It's now Arcane Echo. And this is really fun. It now recharges your next weapon skill instantly. This is really fun. I liked it a lot because that leads to some really unique gameplay that an Elementalist or especially in Catalyst has, that you can reset your weapon skills, or at least one of them, twice. So if you use the elite skill of Catalyst, you actually can use it twice or thrice actually. So that means that you can, for example, 3 times cast a Meteor Shower, maybe Healing Rain, some really important weapon skills. And I think that's really fun. And with the trait, where is it? Arcane Lightning here, you now get quickness when you use Arcane Echo. So that can help to cast it faster, but it's not a big change. So I like this rework. I think that makes it more interesting. I'm not sure if it will be run anywhere outside of a really niche scenario in World vs. World, but I guess it's fun. Then we have Cliff of Elemental Power. This got completely reworked as well. Now you get a special effect depending on the attunement you're in, which is way better than just the random conditions that you get on this when you activate it. You get Condi Cleanse, you get a Daze, you get a Barrier, or you get a just Burning. I feel like this is what it should have been in the beginning, and I think this might be worth running in a lot of game modes now, if the damage numbers and the numbers in general are good enough. Then Pyromancer's Pursuers. This trait no longer removes smite when triggering flame explosion. This is one of the most overlooked changes here, because this is a big buff for every single game mode. And this is a solo trait because it gives you crazy amount of might. So in solo play, this is extremely strong, but also now in competitive modes, that makes all Elementalist builds that use the fire trait line way better. It's a big buff, because you no longer lose some might stacks when you move out of fire, so to say. And this is really good. This is just a straight up crazy buff. And then we have a rework to Blinding Ashes, which was a trait that was fun, but completely underwhelming. It's like completely non-existent. So it blinded enemies that you burned on a very high ICD. And now it's just Inferno. That means burn now scales with power instead of condition damage, but at a reduced rate. So this is interesting in some scenarios. You could maybe make that work in some PvE scenarios where you play Scepter or something, you play a power build and you just get some more burning out of that, more damage with the weapon as well. But you could also maybe make some Celestial build actually with that, and maybe, but I feel like Pyromancer's Pursuers is just better than this one. But I guess it's a very interesting trait. I like the idea of that. And then we have Soothing Disruption. So this currently gives Vigor and Regeneration on your cantrips, and now it only gives Regeneration, and depending on the cantrip that you use, it gives some different boon. That's, I guess, okay, but you typically didn't use that trait for the most part anyway. I talked about that already. And then the big change here is actually Elemental Bastion. This trait now causes auras to grant Alacrity in addition. So Alacrity is now on 2 Grandmaster traits in Tempest. So one of them is when you charge your overlords, and the second one is when you provide an aura to your allies, they also grant Alacrity. So both of them are, so to say, competing, but both of them, depending on the duration here, should be able to upkeep Alacrity permanently. And that means you actually can use that trait for healer and the other trait for DPS Alacrity variant, which is a really cool, interesting design. This just makes this trait really strong as a healer. It's just a straight up buff to heal Tempest. Straight up. If that's able to upkeep it permanently. I don't know the numbers here, but it should. And then you can now move while using the Tailored Victory skill. That's just a buff. And this is just just a Weaver buff. I like that. So Engineer gets an update to the Elixir skills. So all of them just get buffed. Maybe. It's a little bit weird. B gets buffed for sure, but C is like, yeah, it's instant. That's good. And it heals you for each boon. So that's also very good. So I think that's also a very good skill now. But it's not a stun break. But at least you can cast it when you are feared, for example, or taunted. Just Elixir R is not a straight up buff. It's now a stun break, but the cooldown goes up in competitive modes. So I feel like all of them are okay now, but it's not like insane. Detection Pulse is completely gone. It's now Flashbang, and it's like a projectile. Yeah, I guess that's okay. But when we talk about it, Flashbang, the trait, actually is reworked and is now called Grand Entrance, and is now not as obnoxious anymore. It's still a very good trait because Explosive Entrance grants resistance now. So you have an access to get resistance to be immune against blind and chill and stuff that is really annoying you as an engineer. And then the crit chance helps a little bit with the damage as well. So this is the new Flashbang. New skill and not a trait anymore. Then the Elixir Gun skill here gets improved a bit. That's good. And then the completely reworked bomb kit. As I would say, it's a completely different kit now. The auto attack is weaker now in PvP, but I would say for the most part, you only use the 2 skill now in PvE for the damage. 3, 4, and 5 are not damage at all. It's utility. So the 3 skill is now Magnet Bomb, and it's just a pull, while the Smoke Bomb is now the Tool Belt skill. And the Tool Belt skill is now used to actually stealth, and you actually can use it instantly. So you can use it as blast finisher in there, especially with the Big Old Bomb, which is the 5 skill. And this will now combo the blast finisher twice. So that means you can actually get 6 seconds of stealth with the Smoke Bomb. Actually quite interesting. I'm not sure if this kit will actually be run in any game mode now, because it's like very niche. It has a lot of CC, and that's about it. So you can make some nasty bunker builds maybe in PvP. But other than that, I feel like it's a really weird kit. And then we have Flamethrower gets also complete rework. So I think the most notable one is that Smoke Vent. So the stun break that you had on your weapon skill now is now moved to the tool belt skill, and you get a new skill that actually just overpowers your attack, and you get quickness and might and burning nearby enemies, and you have some 5 really supercharged Flamethrower attack with the 5 skill. So I don't know, it feels like Flamethrower is again completely reworked, but I feel like it's more useful than this bomb kit, especially in PvE. I feel like the Flamethrower might be actually quite strong now. Especially because they changed Juggernaut trait. So that means that you don't longer pulse stability, instead grant stability and fire aura when you use Napalm. So that means that you actually really have to use Juggernaut in conjunction with the Flamethrower. Other than that, it doesn't make any sense. It's already like that for the most part. But this is now really just a trait that changes Flamethrower. That's about it. So I feel like this is actually very specific, and not a lot of builds would use that probably. Then they made it the grenade kit. The grenade velocity made them baseline 100% increase. And the trait no longer only is the buff to the radius and not the velocity. That's a big buff, but typically engineers that use grenade kit run that trait anyway, so it's not that much of a buff if you think about it. But still, it gives you access to a 7% DPS increase anyway, and that's obviously 7% more damage by freeing you up to not take this trait if you are able to hit the grenades anyway with the smaller radius. Then this trait is also reworked. You now get Fury when you inflict bleeding on an enemy, and Fury has increased effectiveness. This makes it easier to crit cap. That's again something that I don't really enjoy, but it's a good thing for people that want to get more damage, because that means that just Fury is better on an engineer with the trait line here. And that means that you have to change your gear. If you were running that trait before, you now have to change your gear because you will get a higher value from Fury in PvE. But that's a straight up buff. And then you get a new Grandmaster trait that grants stability and quickness when you disable an enemy. And this, in conjunction with the new Flamethrower and the bomb kit, can be really obnoxious in PvP. I can see some really nasty bunker builds here, because you get so much CC and get a lot of stability and quickness because of that. I feel like this can be, this trait looks scary. I think this is not a trait that you would use in, maybe you can use it in PvE in a solo build, and then it will be fine and fun actually. But in competitive modes, this looks really annoying. Really, really annoying. And then they reworked Iron Blooded as well. This is now chain reactivity. Successfully comboing a field with a blast or leap finisher grants you barrier. Every third trigger of this trait grants a larger barrier and might. This is very niche. I think this is just a competitive mode trait. It will not be used in PvE ever, because it's really selfish and not really, it's very specific. But in PvP, maybe on some kind of hammer build, maybe. I think it's interesting, at least. It's an interesting trait. I'm not sure if it's really good, but it's an interesting one. And then we have Gadgeteer that's just buffing Slick Shoes to have 2 stunt breaks when you take this trait, and Utility Goggles gives protection instead of barrier. Okay. Oh, it grants barrier instead of protection, sorry. So yeah, it's just straight up better to use this trait now, but I'm not sure if you would really run that for the most part. Then we have the Holosmith traits that they actually forgot to show on stream. This is actually quite big. This 5 skill in Holoforge is now an evade. This is actually really strong. It has a crazy defiance damage, so it's a crazy launch as already. Has crazy crit chance, does a decent amount of damage. It's a blast finisher, and now evades. So it's actually really, really overloaded. It's a really good skill. Costs a lot of heat as well, but still. Then they increased the power coefficient of Prime Light Beam by quite a bit actually in PvP, so it will hit harder. And this Vent Exhaust will now grant Vigor on dodge as well. It's actually really big, because this is already a trait that is quite useful in competitive modes. And Guardian actually gets not a lot of changes. Guardian is really, I would say, quite small for a Guardian, even though it's the favorite child of ArenaNet. It's not really that much changed. So now the Orb of Wrath, so the Scepter auto attack, is now tracking the target. That can be really fun, because now you can just sidestep it for the most part, so you can just wiggle and you will actually not get hit by this, and now it's actually following you. That's a buff to Scepter, and the Scepter 3 just gets a cooldown decrease. I think that's fair. Then they reworked the focus skill So we get just 5-second cooldown of the 5, but we get a really crazy good or interesting skill, let's say. Ray of Judgment is now a ground targeted area, and allies in the area get cleansed and get regen, and they get hit by the Ray of Light that you now would just get to one enemy, will get hit in a smaller version if they move in the area. So I feel like this is a buff, but I'm not sure if this is really the change where you would say, oh my god, I have to run focus now. I feel like this might be some kind of PvP side-noting build, could use that, but in PvE, if the damage number is not that high, you would not run that. I feel like the offhand weapons are so competitive on Guardian, or the two-handed weapons also, you would not use focus just for that, especially if you can't really get the block consistently to explode. So I feel like that's a nice change, but I'm not sure if focus will be the best weapon after that anyway. And then we have the big nerfs here actually. So Guardian gets now the Binding Blade, will now actually just hit the original target. So you can't stack multiple of those very easily and get a lot of damage out of that if you stand in the enemy hitbox. They increase the power coefficient to counteract that, but I feel like this is still a nerf. So Guardian 5 Greatsword is still nerfed in damage, I would say. And then we have just, this is now these additional damage in the first strike. That's just a buff in competitive modes where you typically only hit the first strike and not the next ones because people might move out. In PvE, it's just a damage buff straight up. You get more damage on this symbol. And the 3 skill is just a little bit more healing in the first hit, while the second and third and so on will have lesser. I think there's just a little bit of juggling of the numbers, but not too much. The big buff that we get on Guardian is the Line of Warding, actually reducing the cast time over half. It's actually crazy. It's now like the Staff Earth wall from Elementalist. I think this is a big buff, and I feel like this is not only a big buff in World vs. World to Firebrand, but it's also a big buff to Firebrand as a healer in PvP. So I feel like this might be the way to make Firebrand even better. Maybe it's actually useful now in Conquest already. In Push it's quite good already, but maybe in Conquest now as well. This is just, yeah, flavor, I think. No more burning on this skill when you activate it. You wouldn't do that for the most part. It gives you passive condition damage, so no. And then no longer inflicts burning, and now inflicts blind and weakness. That's interesting because it's now a stun break that actually makes sense to use if you really wanted to use as a stun break, because it actually inflicts weakness and blind as well. This is now granting protection, yeah, nothing too big. And then this trait now applies its bonus damage against enemies that are exposed. That's a big buff for Fractals, for example, and stuff, where you have actually exposed bosses that are not CC'd after that. Sometimes that happens in raids as well. So this is a nice buff, but Guardian overall doesn't change too much, which is okay because Guardian is already in a very good spot in all game modes, I would say. Mesmer is interesting. Mesmer doesn't get that many changes, but the changes it gets is actually quite impactful. So we have Phase Retreat, Chaos Armor, and Chaos Storm, just cooldown decreases, staff buffs in PvP and World vs. World. I guess that's fair, it was not that good. Then some X buffs, that's also good. And more importantly, they remove Power Block. So Power Block was now giving you 15-second cooldowns if you interrupted enemies instead of the normal 5 seconds. Now it's like, this is really important and really annoying to counterplay. Now it's just giving you a damage buff. And Furious Interruption now gives you Might in addition. So it means like if you go for a full interrupt build, you just get a more damage output. That might be useful, but I feel like this was really the big thing why you took this trade, is because you actually were able to negate the enemy for longer. So I feel like that might really be the downfall of Power Block, and we would not see that. It depends on the damage buff, of course, but I feel like not good enough for the most part in competitive modes. Was already not used in PvE, of course. Evasive Mirror, really bad trait now, has been reworked. Now it's Wandering Mind. Cleanses a non-damaging condition and gains swiftness in your Revenant attack. I don't know what the ICT will be on this one, but I feel like this, if the ICT is long, which I expect it to be, it's not good. Anyway, you would typically not use that trait in all game modes, even after the rework. But if the ICT is really low, maybe you can actually use it, but most of the time, no. Then Necromancer, again, like the Engineer, gets some reworked because improved Alacrity now doesn't give you critical strike damage anymore, but you will now get critical strike damage instead of critical strike chance from danger time. So it's just more crit chance if you take this trait, and that's the important part, crit damage from danger time and more crit strike chance from flow of time if you have alacrity, which should be in PvE in group scenarios or even in solo scenarios all the time the case. So that means that you just have to change your gear. You get more crit chance. That means that you probably will be able to run full berserk instead of some assassin pieces in there. This is a change that is annoying because you have to change your gear if you don't have full legendary gear rather. But if you have that, then it's a buff for just damage. It's a damage buff if you can use danger time as well. Depends a bit if you're full DPS Chronomancer or not, but it's a buff for Chronomancer, I would say, if the damage numbers and the crit chance numbers here actually working out. We don't know exactly what it will be, but that's good. And Illusionary Reversion is a trait now that is somewhat underused because it's in a very competitive spot. Shatter skills generate a clone if you have enough clones present. It needs 3 clones, and now it grants alacrity in addition to its previous effect. So that can be useful in competitive modes, but it would be, in my opinion, better if it would be quickness, because then you can actually burst the enemy. I think alacrity is something that is more passive, whereas quickness is more aggressive, and I feel like if you shatter with 3 clones, it would be better if fitting, more suited to this if it would be quickness. But I guess that's just how it goes. Then we have Mirage. Also, probably the biggest winner of the whole patch is Mirage, I would say. You just half the cooldown of the split search. That's crazy because it was really annoying if you double dodged. It was not able to use it twice. Now you can. The power coefficient is in PvE is up. That makes Power Mirage even better, especially because the Doomcloak trait now reduces the cooldown of Mindflake and Cry of the Frustration. So that might be a competitor to Infinite Horizon, even in PvE, because it just gives you more F1 and F2 shatters. But this is very, very strong in competitive modes. This will now be insane. It's already run on a Power Mirage and will now be even better. It just gives you more damage output, which is really good for the Mirage lovers out there because it's a really strong power build already, and this will be definitely a very good pick, meta pick in PvP and maybe even World vs. World for the split searching in big circs. They improved the boon radius on Chaos Vortex, that's nice. And they reworked the mirrored axis. It's now Phantom Pain and just gives you more damage based on the number of illusion shattered. Okay, that's good for damage build. I think this is very much helping the Power Mirage, of course. And if the damage bonus is actually also condition, then it might also help condition Mirage. But the biggest thing here is Mirage Mantle is now reworked, which now currently gives just ambush skills more utility. Now it's completely reworked, and this trait now causes ambush skills in general to grant wounds to nearby allies. This is really good because this will just make a support Mirage viable, because this will just give alacrity in PvE and I think some other boon in competitive modes. And this is just now you can play every single Mirage as an alacrity provider. It doesn't matter if you are Staff Mirage, you can play a Greatsword Mirage if you wanted to. Everything now can apply alacrity if you use this trait. And this is really a big buff to alacrity DPS Mirage. That makes it viable, I would say. So overall, Mirage, big winner in all game modes. So Necromancer is getting some changes, and some of them are maybe considerable nerfs. So Mark of Blood is now also be able to trigger by allies. This is important because now it gives regeneration to allies very easily, and you can also dodge and give that as well if you run blood magic. That's good. Life transfer, just a straight up buff. That's a really big buff actually. Then reduce the aftercast of the skill. Veil of Doom, that's nice. Warhorn 4 buff. Then this is just a fix, I would say, that this is annoying with mounts. Lich Form gets some buffs. I don't think if that's really important. Signet of Suffering, I feel like this is also not that crazy. It's just a buff, but the trait is already not that good, I would say. And then we have Transfusion. Transfusion, that's the big thing here, is actually on Necromancer. Transfusion gets reworked, so you can't heal your downed allies anymore, and you lose a lot of healing from your 4 skill in Shroud. And marks can now be triggered by allies, not only Mark of Blood, but all the others as well. They will heal and grant additional supportive effects to allies when triggered. Create Chillbanes at your location when you use your 4th Shroud skill. So you get some healing when you use for 4th Shroud skill, so you don't lose the healing, but you lose the down skill stuff. So this is really good. Now, Mark of Blood grants Vigor now. Chillbanes heals and protection. The 4th skill removes conditions, and the 5th skill visibility. So overall, that just helps Necromancer to get more boons out, help your allies in a more active way, like Chronomancer and Druid. and you get more stability access. So in general, that's good for people that want to play it as some kind of supporter, but you lose the uniqueness of having the nice healing for downstate, and the Mercy Relic is dead because of that. So overall, I think it's a nerf to the very chaotic loving Scourge healer, but now it's more like a very uniform healer that, like every other healer, does a lot of heals, a lot of condition cleanses, a lot of stability, and a lot of boons in general. So the uniqueness of Heal Scourge is lost, but you get decent support, and I feel like this is especially important in World vs. World. You can now run Staff as a support Scourge or something, and you will actually help your team quite a bit, I would say. And then we have Glide, just a buff in PvE, just less health percentage decrease. That's good, I guess. Okay, let's talk about Ranger. It's also not that big. Ranger is probably the smallest one here. Just some buffs to Torch. Yeah, not really changing that much. It helps, but it's not crazy, especially in competitive modes. That will not change a lot. This now grants quickness, quick draw. I guess that makes sense. It's already called half like that. And Light on your feet is now more useful because it gets it on every Ranger skill that evades and increase the effect duration. So I feel like this is very good in all game modes now. If you play a Condi Ranger, really good there. Unstoppable Union now grants protection when entering or leaving beast mode. I guess that's a good thing. Then you have some Cleansing Unleashed, just gets a nice icon on the bar. And Biorhythm is now replacing Restorative Strikes, which is a nerf in some situations, but is a buff in the long-term solo builds for Untamed, for example. You lose the protection, but you get more healing up. And I feel like this is making Untamed even stronger in harder fights when you already have protection from skills. So this is actually, I think, an Untamed solo buff, solo build for PvE. But all the other changes here, okay, but nothing crazy. Ranger, not really any changes. I'm surprised that we don't get any Condi Soul Beast nerfs for PvP. I feel like there is a hotfix coming after the monthly AT today. So maybe we will get that before, because this is happening in a month now from recording of this stream and video. But I think there will be a hotfix to Condi Ranger before that. Revenant, again, not too much of the changes. The biggest one here is at the bottom. The dodge of Vindicator in PvE now applies Alacrity, the healing dodge. This makes healing Vindicator viable, and this might be really interesting, especially in conjunction with this trait, heal and grant protection to nearby allies when you use a healing skill. So I think overall, healing Vindicator, Alacrity healing Vindicator is not a meme anymore. It's a really good build, or decent build at least, to play in PvE. I like that. It's not in PvP and World vs. World though, so don't get excited there. Then just some setup, that's what I talked about earlier in the stream. Outgoing healing effectiveness is increased instead of reduced incoming condition damage on this trait. So they really want to set up Renegade as a healer. This is not obviously making it worthwhile to do that, but if there comes some changes in the future, maybe we get a Renegade healer. I'm not sure if the community actually likes that, but that's what they want to do. Then they reworked the Malex. So we got now a lot of Torment on Banish Enchantment. We get a Dark Aura and Might on the healing skill. There's actually quite a lot of Might that you possibly can get, so it's actually quite nice. And this now grants access to a follow-up skill, Unyielding Impact. And this is actually a very hard-hitting follow-up skill with Burning, Torment, Poison, and damage, so it's actually quite nice. So depends a bit on the energy cost, but if it's nice in the energy cost, it can be a really good skill in competitive modes, or even in PvE if you want to play Condition Herald, for example, or even Condition Renegade, maybe, if this is enough damage. And then we get some changes to the traits so that you now get a lot of Dark Aura, and this just helps because Dark Aura siphons health from nearby enemies if you use that. I'm not sure if that's high enough to actually make it worthwhile, but at least it gives some more flavor. And this trait was not used anyway. So Brutality now does not remove stability anymore, which was a really, really strong skill. Now it's just giving you more damage when you strike a foe that has protection or stability. It's not as toxic anymore, but also not as strong anymore, I would say. And then Aggressive Arrival is now nerfed because it now gives resistance when legend swapping instead of a movement skill, because the movement skill was way better than the resistance on legend swapping, because oftentimes when you use the movement skill, you wanted to get resistance. Legend swapping, it's more like you do that passively, but it depends on the duration, but still, I think decent changes for Revenant overall. not too much. The biggest one is obviously Alacrity in PvE. Okay, so let's talk about Thief now. Thief is interesting because Thief, in my opinion, gets decent amount of reworks, and most of them are actually quite good. I think a lot of people would like that. So Black Potter gets buffed again with the initiative cost. We get initiative increases on Scepter 3 and 2. And this is, in my opinion, okay, because we get baseline initiative from Scepter, from Spectre. This one here is now not decreased. So Spectre now has reduced maximum initiative, and this will get removed. And that's just to counteract that Scepter stays in the same spot, to give it more initiative cost on the heavy skills. So overall, that's a Spectre buff, I would say, because those two skills stay similar, I would say. And you have more initiative at maximum that helps to use other skills as well. So overall, Spectre buff. Then Death Blossom, just a little bit more, I don't know, utility. Then you have Signet of Shadows now crowds Dark Aura. Okay, I guess with the traits that might be interesting. And overall, just Daggerstorm, Mark buffs, even the odds also are buffed, but not crazy, just some damage numbers changing here. Then we get some damage number with the reveal training, also base power up. That's a nice thing, but it's only in World vs. World and PvP, so maybe people will take that. But I feel like it's very aggressive, maybe not, we will see. Then increase the damage per condition, also just some damage numbers up. Then we get the Dark Aura traits here. That is very interesting because this is now giving Dark Aura to allies and also the barrier. So that might be useful as a support Spectre, or it definitely will be, because Dark Aura decreases the condi damage you take by 10%. Then it's quite interesting. Gain Dark Aura when you steal. Gaining Dark Aura heals nearby allies, especially with this trait. This can be really good because now you can even heal your allies with getting a Dark Aura or giving them Dark Aura. So maybe that's a new interesting trait setup. I'm not sure how high the numbers will be, but still. And then Cover of Shatter. When you steal, create a field around yourself that grants protection to nearby allies. Gaining Dark Aura removes a condition from nearby allies. So those three traits together can be really interesting in some kind of build where you get a lot of Dark Aura. Every time you jump through a dark field, you get Dark Aura, heal allies, you remove a condition. That can work. Maybe you can make some crazy cooks in competitive modes, but I feel like that's more like in PvE where this is actually useful. Then we have some Daredevil buffs. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't feel that crazy. This is just more initiative here. Then some buffs in the base healing here. Some endurance buff. Just stuff that is not used gets a small number changes. So this is the first class where you really see just a few number changes and one big rework with the Dark Aura. So I feel like they might help, but I'm not sure if they really change a lot. This now reduces Steel Recharge in addition to its previous effects. Maybe that's the reason why you now take it, especially in competitive modes. That can be really interesting. We will see if Daredevil comes back because of that. Probably not, but we will see. And then you can, this is the same treatment as the Greatsword 5 on Guardian, just a little bit more consistent how it works. And then you have Unhindered Combatant buffs, that it doesn't get the exhaustion anymore when you remove Cripple. That's a big buff in competitive modes, and in general it's just buffed Daredevil for competitive modes. Apparently they really want to see it go back to where it was. And I already talked about Spectre getting buffed, but it also gets some interesting rework to Shade Step. So nowadays, you just every single attack that you do in your Shadow Shot gives Alacrity to your allies. Now it is depending on the skill that you use. So the 2 skill will give Alacrity, and the 3 skill gives protection, the 4 skill heals, the 5 skill gives Aegis, and the 1 skill heals as well. So you will spam your 2 skill to give Alacrity, and the other skills you will use if you need the wounds or the healing. So that's more interesting than just spamming the attacks, but it makes it also way more overloaded. It depends on the duration here. It's also regeneration apparently in PvP and World vs. World, so it's a very aggressively useful skill now. It's not only giving a blast finisher and removes conditions and torments and cripples and deals damage, but it also gives Alacrity or region. So it's really overloaded, the skill. I'm not sure if I like that, but it's definitely more interesting than every skill that you do gives Alacrity. I'm not sure. We will see if how it turns out. Let's talk about Warrior before we talk about the Relics. So Warrior just gets some X nerfs. I think they will not change too much. It's just helping a bit, but it's not the buffs rather. It's really not changing too much. They also buff Mainhand Mace, also not that crazy, but they buff 100 blades and sadly not in a way that is actually affecting it. It's only in PvE and it's only increasing the damage. That's it. You can't move anyway and the cast is still the same time, so it's just a skill that is still not worthwhile to use in PvP and World vs. World. And even in PvE it might be very punishing because you just cast it very slowly, you can't move. It's still not crazy. They want to keep the identity of the skill, but I feel like the identity just makes it very weak. So I think the biggest change that they should have made here, that you can move while casting it, but that's not what they want. Then we get some vulnerability instead of bleeding on the skill. I guess that's okay on the straight. You wouldn't use it for the most part anyway. And then you have Merciless Hammer damage increase and Stalwart Strength damage increase. That's just to help Hammer Spellbreaker in particular, I would say, as a DPS weapon. Berserker gets way easier uptime of quickness now in PvE, and you also heal with Dead or Alive, but it's not really big changes to make this even better. It's just helping it to maintain quickness more easily, because currently it's quite tight. Now it's easier. And then Bladesworn buffs, just more flow increases, and just the damaging skills a bit more useful, I would say. But for the most part, it's Bladesworn is still a little bit gimmicky, but a little bit better than before. That's all the changes here are not crazy reworks for the most part. It's just helping a bit with DPS Bladesworn and PvE for the most part. I think in competitive modes, nothing will change for Warrior here. I think you are right. I think the normal skill here has 3 seconds. I think this is what it's currently. I think they just had a typo. I'm pretty sure in the balance preview when I looked at the number, I think it was 3 seconds. I think they're just buffing it overall. I think this is a typo. Then let's talk about the relics. So I make it a bit bigger so that you can see it better. So they don't have any names, they're just placeholder because they don't want to spoiler the story for us. So the first one, enemies you interrupt are afflicted with a unique damaging debuff. So that will be something like you interrupt them and they get a debuff, and after 3, 5, whatever seconds it deals some damage. This is interesting. I'm not sure how good that will be, maybe in competitive modes, but I feel like if the number is too high or too low, it will, I don't know if it has an impact. I think it's, the thing is, even if the number is really high on this damage, you still drop the relic for that. So you have to use a different relic. You can't use a defensive relic and stuff. So I'm not sure if that will be really big game changer. Depends a bit on the number here. The second relic, upon using a stance skill, cleanse conditions from yourself. They currently have it very aggressively balanced, that's what they said, with 2 conditions removed when you use stance skill. This is insane. If this comes out, this will come out, I think, on, 3rd of June, so that will be before the balance patch. This will be the relics already. This will be absolutely insane. In PvP and World vs. World, this is absolutely insane on a Soul Beast and on a Weaver. Those 2 are absolutely insane because those have crazy amount of stances and they are all really good. So I think this is a really, really good one, especially on a Weaver. I really see a stance Weaver, some kind of really obnoxious hammer Condi Weaver. Absolutely crazy. Then Relic 3, upon using a cantrip or meditation skill, grant protection. Depends a bit on the duration, but most classes don't use that. Maybe Guardian has some meditations in a build. Maybe you can play some Core Guardian with meditations to gain protection, maybe. But I feel like typically, I'm not sure if that's really changing too much. Then Relic 4, grant yourself a stack of might when you grant might to yourself. So it's just giving you 2 stacks of might. Maybe that has an ICD. Gain increased crit chance while you have might at or above the stack threshold. That's just a very aggressive thing, and this is interesting because that's the first relic that actually gives you crit chance. Because in PvE, if you need more crit chance, that actually will just, in group scenarios, will just give you more crit chance. I think this is a really interesting relic because that might help classes that can't crit cap that easily to crit cap very easily with this relic. Depends a bit of the numbers here, but I feel like that can actually work decently well. Then we have Relic 5, gain volatility when you successfully combo a field with a blast finisher. Blasting at the stack threshold triggers an explosion, granting increased damage. Depends a bit on the damage number, but it's interesting if the damage number is high. This can be useful on some kind of Elementalist, maybe some engineer builds, in PvE especially, but also in competitive modes, maybe this number is high enough to make it worthwhile, typically not. Then we have Relic 6, the last one. Gain a stacking buff upon completion certain combat triggers. So you have to use a healing skill, elite skill, evade an attack, disable an enemy, finish the field. And everything has to be done once. And then you get an increase in stats and all boons for duration. That's really interesting. This is like some kind of, you go completely insane if you do those things. They have probably also an ICD. But if the numbers are big enough here, this can be really fun to use in some kind of PvP scenario. In PvE, I am not sure if that's really useful. If the stat increase is good, maybe, but the boons are completely useless for the most part. So I think this is a really cool, interesting relic, but might be a little bit harder to play around. We will see if the damage numbers and stuff are actually working out, but I feel like the relics are actually quite interesting this time. That's my take at least. We will see how the numbers are, but I feel like for the most part, it's actually quite fun. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks to all my supporters on YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. I really appreciate the help to keep my lights on. And now, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.